Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Roman and Kristen Show. My name is Kristen Brown.
And I'm Roman Wyden.
And today we are going to be talking about a subject that we both feel very passionately about. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in a way that Roman and I really seek to try to help other people. Like, we want to bring light to tough conversations. This is why we have started this podcast, because there is so many things that are in the underbelly of relationships that people are not talking about. And they're the very things that we both believe that once you start talking about these things and bring these things up to the light, they can be healed so that people can have the loving, connected relationships that they have always wanted. So today we're talking about sex and porn addiction. And I'm going to be picking Roman's brain a lot because this is something that he is pretty well versed in and has done a lot of research and things regarding. And I feel like we've had other conversations regarding this on a social audio app, and we can just riff for hours because there's a lot of pieces and parts to this. But what I believe our intention is, because we did pre-game before this conversation, because we wanted to be sure that we were going to touch upon the subjects and the questions that people would likely ask and to bring some light to that, but also so that we can take away the shame that swirls around this topic so that people can really start to go within and do the necessary work to heal, or at least to start asking themselves some questions to see if perhaps maybe they do have a porn or sex addiction. So Roman, let's just get started. Let's jump right in from the beginning. I read an article. I've only read one article about this ever in my life, and I did it last night, and it wasn't even a full article. And it was in Psychology Today on the webs. And it says that more than 90% of young men watch porn on a regular basis. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I've read also some articles and, looked into statistics. Absolutely doesn't surprise me because it's now so readily available, right? I heard a friend recently say that Instagram has almost become a sort of a sexual scroll, right? You see stuff on YouTube that you would have never seen on YouTube 5-6 years ago. Porn is so readily available. Some of these companies target kids as young as 14, 16 that see porn. It's, one could say it's shocking, but at the same time, I always look at it from this supply and demand point of view. It's like not so much, oh my God, 90% of young men are watching porn. The question is really why?
Yes.
And I'm answering this for myself. I'm not the top expert on this. I have my own experience with addictions, which I'll be happy to share as an open book. I've done a lot of research. I'm a relationship coach, life coach, so I have experience certainly hearing it from couples directly, from talking to the husband separately, talking to the wife separately. But really, why the addiction, right? And I think we talked about this. I'd love to just share my own definition of an addiction. There's the scientific and the medical and the neurological definitions that I just don't think are necessary because we get lost in it's the dopamine receptors and then it's the this and it's the this label. What it is very simple to me, right? It's an addiction is a distraction that you can no longer control. And no longer control means it's out of control. And out of control doesn't necessarily mean you have zero control, because certain days you're like, I'm not doing it. The next 2 days you're like, I'm doing it. And you just can't control it, right? So when it's out of control, now it's an addiction because we're addicted to keep doing it because we get, sure, we can bring dopamine in here, but we get a reward, right? Just keep it on sort of layman's terms. We get a payoff. And it's short term, right? Because, oh, I feel so great. Or, oh, I get to check out and numb out and not be in this very moment. This is great, right? Which is an old pattern. It's a childhood pattern. So when I say, why are these men addicted to porn? It's a trifold, quadruple-fold answer. Maybe I can just touch upon one of the reasons why. Is very simple. And I wrote this down when we were talking before. It's a fear of intimacy, right? Because in porn, you don't have to be intimate. You don't know the people. You're kind of a voyeur. You're watching. You can stop at any time. There's no feelings that are hurt, right? You can even say to yourself, oh, she's unattractive, she's ugly, she's too fat, and you can move on, right? And you don't ever have to deal with the fact that, well, you were the one that chose to be there for a minute, like in a real relationship, and now you no longer like to be there. How come? And can we have a conversation around it, right? You don't have to do any of that. So again, no judgment. I've watched porn in my life quite a bit. Um, and but it is a fear of intimacy. It is a fear of actually connecting with a human being and having to be present and responsible and communicate authentically, right? So that's one thing. The second one is just look, when we get to be a voyeur and we get to see sexual imagery, we get aroused, right? And that's something that in the body, it's like, oh, now I want to masturbate. I want to please myself. I want to have an orgasm, right? And that's the unhealthy part, because the healthy way to do this would be to feel aroused in life in general. And we've all been there. We've all had days where we wake up or go to bed, or during the day, we're just like, oh my God, I feel so sexual or aroused. And you can then, and we get into this later, but you can self-pleasure, which in a healthy way, right? But it's so easily just to go and oh, I'm just going to go watch some porn and have an orgasm and go back to work. And then the third one is really, it's the numbing out. It's the sexualizing of stress, overwhelm, fear of responsibility, not wanting to be an adult in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Life is getting more intense, as we all notice. The world is getting more intense. So the pressure is stronger, weighing down on us. So if we haven't matured, if we haven't healed our childhood wounds, then we are still children, and we are still completely confronted by all these responsibilities of the world, and that pressure needs to go somewhere. And
Yeah.
so in French, they call it le petit meurtre, like little death is the orgasm, because it's like this release of like, you just, the pressure just died and you released, right? It's like tension, pressure, and it's released, and it's like, oh my God, it feels so good, right? For 30 seconds, if you know what I mean. And then we still have the same problems of the world waiting for us. And now we got to do it again and again and again and again. So I could go on, but those are kind of like
Yeah.
the gist of the reasons why I think so many young men. And also, by the way, I just want to say that the statistics show that there's also a really high amount of percentage, I forgot what it is, 60 or close to 60% of women, same thing, watching porn. And, so this is not a male per se phenomena, right?
Right. I will say that what I have discovered is that more men use it as their self-soothing and their distraction. Women can too, but I wonder, this is one of my theories, is that typically because men, based on society's rules and whatnot, that they're not allowed to feel, they're not allowed to say they're scared, they're not allowed to say they're hurt, they're not allowed to ask for a hug or to show any type of weakness. When you couple that with the fact that men are biologically wired not to stay in their emotions as long as women are, it really makes the window that a man can process through his emotions very, very small, where it's okay for women to feel all these heavy emotions and to express these emotions and talk about these emotions. So here's what women are mostly like processing more than men are processing. And so when I feel like when a man first, because they can very readily reach themselves when they first start going, wow, that felt really good. It is this way of self-soothing from this overload of emotion that they're not like allowed to process in the world. And that's one
Yeah.
thing that based on the people that I've spoken to, because what's I find fascinating about this whole entire topic, and I'm so happy that I'm watching it come to light more in the world, this is not as hidden as it was. Like people are more readily coming forward and saying, I have a porn and or sex addiction or however that works. I want you to delineate that in a second. But since you and I have started talking about this and I have been coaching other people through it and sending people to you to be coached through it. And just the more that this is talked about, I'm seeing it rise up and rise up. And it's like this underbelly. So it's becoming, I don't know the right word to say, but maybe less shameful, maybe less something that people are afraid to admit because thankfully the internet and other things that are bringing these things to light so we can really start healing these things. So my question for you, Roman, is that what is the difference between a porn addiction and a sex addiction?
Yeah, it's a great question, and certainly they overlap, right? A simple way to look at it is a porn addiction could be done, in the privacy of your own home. You don't have to interact with humans, right? It's still part of the sex addiction. The programs talk about this, right? Sex or porn or masturbation is still part of a sex addiction, but you could be addicted to porn and then be what's called an anorexic, never wanting to actually have sex with a human and staying away from it, right? Not leaving your house ever
Wow. Wow.
because you're avoiding the intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying, "Oh, I don't need sex with other people. I'm just watching porn and masturbate, and I that way I'm much happier. I don't have to interact and deal with emotions and people, whatever." Right? That's an anorexic. That's in a double sense. It's like a double whammy of I'm afraid of intimacy. I don't want to deal with it. And that comes from a childhood wound, right? That comes from a abusive background, or there was a lack of nurture. Um, there was a young man happened to me, like my first three girlfriends cheated on me, right? So then you put up a wall. It's like, oh, I don't ever want to get hurt again, so I'm just not going to date, period,
Yes. And I've
right?
seen this.
And they're all these extreme, like it's a spectrum, and we usually, as humans, we go from one extreme end to the other. We go like all in, I'm going to have sex and I'm going to enjoy it, and yay, and then our heart gets broken or we get cheated on, and then we go like, fuck everybody,
Yep.
no more, right? And eventually, if we do the work, we come back to the middle, right? And so again, if we want to just look at that, porn is a sort of an isolated kind of, and you could do it with your partner. That's a different story, but we can talk about that too. But that's an isolated kind of action, and it can be very compulsive quickly. Because I know I just talked to actually a woman this morning who said she used to lock herself into a closet sometimes for 15 hours with a vibrator and compulsively masturbate, right? So we may think of this as cool or sexy or sick or whatever just came up when I said that for whoever's listening. Think about just the compulsivity and the waste of time and the sort of like out of controlness that is, right? And that's masturbation, for example. But now when we go to sex, a sex addict is looking for the dopamine hit of validation, right? The chase. Oh, this woman wants me or this man wants me. So I must be fill in the blank, lovable, I matter, I'm good enough, right? All of that stuff that we didn't get from our parents. And we'll talk about that, not to blame our parents, but we just didn't get it. It wasn't available because they couldn't give it to us, right? And so when we look at it that way, we're just looking to fill this void with an external substance in the case of drugs or a person. And here's what makes sex addiction so powerful. And for me, when I realized about my own addictive behaviors around sex and love, is to realize, oh, wow, I've been using people as a drug. And you got to let that really sink in. Because when you let it sink in, you realize I've told people what they wanted, in my case, women, what they wanted to hear. I've manipulated them and tried to control them so I could get that substance when I needed it, when I needed it. Sometimes even pretending that I would do it for them, right? Or that if they need it, I'm there, right? But it was always kind of a self-seeking, selfish behavior of, I need it. So what do you need? What do I need to say here so that I'll get the drug, right? And that's when I realized, oh, okay, that selfishness is the sex addiction at work. That's a defect of character, if you will, as they call it. And to answer your question, the big difference is that when we do it to people or with people, the damage is actually much bigger. Because for a porn addict, for example, if that's your only addiction is porn and masturbation, you're rewiring your brain a certain way to need that dopamine, right? So you can eventually rewire that, and you can go to rehab. And yes, you may have, impacted the lives of your roommate or your parents if you live with your parents. There's some consequences always. But when you're using people as drugs,
Mhm.
there are now human beings with emotions, with stories that they make up about themselves, that
Themselves, yeah.
they weren't good enough. They weren't a good partner. They must have not been sexual enough, blah, 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 right? Now we're really impacting the environment around us. So the big difference is to go from an isolated activity to involving people and the world. And yeah, that's kind of a general way to make that distinction.
I think that was an excellent way to word that out for everybody. It's basically internal and external. Like, what are you involving in this situation? I do want to
Yeah.
briefly touch upon, Roman, how this feels for somebody who's on the receiving end of this, because I feel it's part of the whole healing process is to understand that our behaviors, whether you're gaslighting somebody or you're using them for sex, or you're not taking responsibility for your behavior, or you're raising your voice, whatever it might be, understanding how that's landing to another human being can help us get a clearer picture of why it's destructive and it's unhelpful. So
Yeah.
as a person I was raised in the culture of this is all normal. It's all normal. Okay. Everybody gets to masturbate to all the porn and go to all the topless bars and and this is, I'm going to be graphic right now, everybody. So shut your ears if you don't like graphic. But I remember
It's what we do.
during back in the 90s when my everybody would go to these bachelor parties and I would hear stories of what these women were doing and like spreading their legs and them making dollar bills and throwing them at the woman's crotch, and the guy put a lollipop in his mouth and you can imagine what was going on. And I remember in my 20s going, this feels so bad to me. Like as the girlfriend and later the wife, I was like, this makes me feel like I'm being cheated on, because this is literally a physical, intimate act. And that word, we know that word intimacy is used in many different ways.
Mm.
But that is when when you're getting naked with, not, you're not getting it, but when someone's nakedness is around you, that's intimate, in my opinion. And so I remember feeling so bad about that. And then moving forward, I probably can tell you that my long-term relationships, there was some iteration of this in all of them. And I was told repeatedly, it's normal, it's normal, it's normal. And I was like, this doesn't feel normal to me. This doesn't feel, but common might be a word that we could say is this is common. But as far as condoning it and just saying, oh yeah, that's just what men do, that made me feel like there was something wrong with me, because one of our friends back in that group back in the day said, "Oh, I love it when my husband goes to the tapas bar because he comes home horny and then I get to, reap the benefits of that." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's one way to look at it, but I didn't like that. I want to be the one that turned on my partner, not some other external force." So, also moving on, I just want to share these because people are listening might be like, "Oh my God, maybe this is happening in my home and I don't even know it." Because with one of my partners, there was some signs like it took them forever to ejaculate. And I'm just sitting there like, I didn't even feel like I was present in this thing. I just felt like they're going at it. And I'm just kind of sitting there like, okay, I'm going to pick up a magazine because I'm not even in this, like it was like a one-man show and it was taking forever. But that raised a red flag to me. And I started to ask questions because I was like, why does this take like this? I've, had enough of my experiences to know that if a guy's waiting between those times, they're ready to go. And it's like they got to hold back. But this was something different. And I was almost like it felt like the person was numb, like was just not feeling it. And then there was so many great spaces in between that I was like, this seems abnormal to me too, because we all know that many men are pretty much ready to go all the time. So I started to ask questions and I started to say, do you masturbate a lot? Like, what's going on here? And I will be honest and say, I was not shaming to these people. I was just like, what is happening? Now, gratefully, there was a part of me that did feel like there's something wrong with me. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not sexy enough. The boobs aren't right. The belly's not right. The butt's not right. The junk isn't right. I didn't know what was, I started to personalize a little bit. And then they would be like, no, that's not it. But I'm like, but why don't you want me? It's a very, very confusing place to be for somebody. So I feel like it's important to bring that up so that, and I'm not sure if this is the same with men on the receiving end of women doing this. So maybe you know anything about that. I don't know. But on the women's receiving end, this is how it feels.
Mm. Well, first of all, that's why I love you, because so much you brought up in just this one spur of thinking here and talking, like so many great things you just brought up. Like if I could just address a few, I made some notes.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
the bachelor party, for example. When I grew up in Switzerland, so when I moved to the States in '92, I was 22 years old. I didn't know what a bachelor party was, and I went to one, and I was like, I was confused. And because of course I was young, and there were strippers, and it was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And but then part of my awareness back then as a 20, I think it was 24 maybe, something said internally, but wait, so this person's getting married,
Yeah.
and and so is this sort of a, well, I'm about to go into some shitty deal, so I got to have fun the last time, the ridiculous fun, right? It's almost like the ball and chain are coming on my foot, so before that happens, let me run another marathon, right? And it just didn't make sense to me. And they're like, well, like you said, everybody does it. It's a tradition. It's whatever. And so I just want to speak to not so much the bachelor party, and I think you brought up a good point there, but this idea of it's common, it's normal, right? Well, men um, do this, and this is a tradition, and women do this, and we have all these things we call normal and common. And here's where I'm bringing it back to our conversation directly, is that I often talk to people, and I talk about when I talk about sex addiction or recovery around that, they always look at me and they go, yeah, but everybody has fantasies, everybody masturbates, everybody watches porn, they come from the sort of like, there's nothing wrong with it. And I will address it in twofold. First of all, not everybody's doing it. That's not true. And also to normalize it and say, well, yeah, it has gotten us into a lot of trouble, because we would be ignorant if we don't look around the world and say, a lot of shit's not working. And a lot of it has to do with sex and love and intimacy and power play, right? It's all related to that. Um, but really, it's like, why normalize it and say, well, everybody's doing it, versus, is it healthy? Is it actually helping me, or is it destroying me, or is it furthering my life, or is it holding myself back? Same for my neighbor, same for the people at the bachelor party. you know 10 years later, they're divorced, right? Because it turns out the husband's a sex addict, or there was cheating. So I wanted to bring that up, because everything I'm about to say or have said so far is not to say that sex isn't normal or healthy, or masturbation isn't, or even watching sexual imagery or all that. I'll get into it, but it's not about never doing it again or not doing it, right? This is not an abstinence kind of conversation. This is
No,
a
it's not.
right? It's an awareness of, where do I cross from healthy into unhealthy, and what's actually better for me and the people involved, right, around me in my life at the time. So I just wanted to make that distinction. But to answer your question, I do believe that for men it's different, but also in a similar way. If you're dating someone and you have great sex, and suddenly the woman is interested in someone else, or uh, there's cheating, or whatever, we also feel like we're not good enough, we're not rich enough, we're not strong enough, or physically beautiful enough, or our junk isn't big enough. All that stuff goes through our minds. And so it's, in a way, it's what I said earlier, it goes back to the same, like, I don't matter, I'm not good enough. I'm going to point back to this, as I've talked about self-love and the importance of that. It's the void that we're trying to fill with something external, and we'll never be able to fill it with anything external. This is an inside job. I heard this recently. I think it was Ram Dass. Somebody did a video, a song with one of his lectures in it. It's a beautiful song.
Wow.
Um, and I'm trying to remember what he said. He called it the real work happens um, inside of the what was it, something like inside of the intimacy of your own heart,
Mm.
something like that, right? And he described it in such a beautiful way, like the real work, the real dopamine hit that's lasting is going to come from the inside job of loving ourselves, and actually reminding ourselves that we do matter, we are good enough, we are lovable. oh, I'm jumping ahead, but I've already given you the answer. But as they always say, the opposite, the cure to addiction is connection.
Wow,
And
that's a powerful statement.
right, and you can't connect to someone else authentically if you can't connect to yourself.
Yeah. And
That's really what it
let's
comes
just
down
talk
to.
about, yes, thank you. Let's just talk about sex. Let's dump into this because I think it's really important to set this groundwork like you were talking about. Sex is healthy. A
Oh
healthy
yeah.
sex
Oh,
life
sex is
is,
beautiful,
oh my God,
healthy,
it's
fun.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's wonderful. And
Yeah.
my gosh, when you find that partner, and I don't mean necessarily everything has to be perfect from go, because I've had this with some of my clients been like, well, yeah, but he's not doing this and he's not doing this. I said, he doesn't freaking know you.
Right.
You got to talk to him about your body. Be willing to tell him what works for you. Oh, he should know. No, he shouldn't.
No,
And
no,
no,
no shooting.
and no, she shouldn't either.
Right.
Right. But sex is, we are sexual beings, and we were created the way we're created, as givers and receivers, meaning male and female, and all the things, and how men are ready to go more, and men are, what do they call it? Microwaves, and we're the slow
Yeah.
cookers, and how
Right.
to, all these type of things. Right. So all of this is normal and natural. And when you can have a healthy sex life with your person.
Yes.
Yet, when it crosses that line and it becomes a means of destructive to yourself, and I mean in a way of avoidance, okay, where you are avoiding your feelings, you're avoiding your heart, you're avoiding those dense emotions, you're avoiding all those things, whether it's sex addiction, porn addiction, shopping addiction, workaholism, it doesn't flip and matter.
Yeah.
It's just an avoidance of those things. And that is not going to take you to the next and best levels of your life, because you're not cleaning out the frickin' garage that you and I talked about in episode 1. You
Yeah.
got to clean out that junk first. And I will tell you that, having coached people through these type of things, these type of sex and porn addictions, and they wanted to, they're like, I had no idea that actual healthy sex with my partner could be like this. Like, it's this beautiful like eruption, because the body's not numbed out. And I will also say that, I think you'll jump onto this when I talk about this, is that porn is a quick, like, it is a rapid arousal for people. And then you get with a person and it may not be that rapid arousal. I've actually had men say to me that, and people that surprised me, like people I didn't think would think like this, they said, I a normal average normal female body wasn't turning me on because she had cellulite, or because she had this, because I was used to the magazines, and it was like I was used to perfection. And so but here's what I know. You can undo that.
Yeah.
That can all be reversed. Yes, that might have been where you became, but that can all be reversed and managed, and people can have a healthy sex life.
Yes. Again, so much that I love how you pack so much substance, into
Yeah.
a sentence and what you talk about. And I think it's important to know that I agree. Sex is beautiful. It's fun. It's really an expansion of who we are. And when you're with somebody who's also loving themselves and has healthy boundaries, right? Knows how, like you said, don't shoot on each other, especially not in the area of sex. If I can
Yeah.
give the most potent advice, that should never be, I'm shooting on you too, but that just cannot be an area where we go, well, figure it out, watch some YouTube videos and then come back and do it right.
Mm-mm.
No, because it's never going to work out. This is probably the most difficult area for us to talk about because of all the taboo and the shame. Some of it is thanks to our churches and our religions, right? Not all of it, but that there is this shame around sex, sexuality. And we've certainly, again, like I said earlier, it's a spectrum, right? We went from shame, it's wrong, it's dirty. And now we have people who are just running around naked, screaming, look at me, I'll give you sex anytime, anywhere, and I'm empowered and I have my shit hanging out because I can, right? That's the other extreme. And so again, finding the middle ground is I think where as humanity, we're going to realize, oh, so it is a beautiful thing. Yes, first of all, it's natural. That's how we were made, right? That's how we were created. It's life force energy that creates life. And so, yes, it's beautiful, it's natural, and we can use it as a tool to celebrate someone together, right? Again, I have my own new opinion around casual sex and one night stands and all that stuff, and we can get into that as well if we have time. But for me, it's really about if we're going to be completely authentic, meaning honest with a human being, and we are respectful, and we are coming at this experience not from a addicted way of being, which means we're not manipulating them to get sex. We're not dressing them up like a doll so we can have our porn fantasy fulfilled, right? And we're not numbing out because we're stressed in life and we just got divorced and now we just want to fuck, right? Excuse my French. But if we don't come from that, if we come from a truly healthy exchange of let's celebrate each other physically and we're honest with each other, and even if later things go wrong, we continue talking about it with honesty and we uncouple or whatever you want to call it, right? Then I believe any experience will be healthy, natural, and I think beautiful. And that's still a gray zone, right? I'm not the expert to say this is right and this is not, and this is healthy and this is unhealthy, but eventually we'll know. Now I'm 53 now, and it took me a long time, lots of relationships, going through a divorce at the moment, right? For reasons that thanks to a lot of my addictive behaviors around sex and intimacy and love, um, and now I'm realizing, okay, I'm starting to finally see what a healthy relationship or romantic relationship or sexual relationship could be, even though I'm not dating and I'm not interested and I'm spending time with myself at the moment, really getting to know me and doing the work there. I'm starting to see it out in the world with certain couples, and I'm starting to wrap my head around it. And that came from a lot of trial and error. And I think the main thing that I'm getting is, again, I have to be honest with myself why I want a certain thing or a person. And that honesty will quickly often stop me from like, I don't need to talk to this person. Why? Oh, I wanted to flirt. Why? Well, I wanted to know that I'm good looking or I still got it. And okay, don't go there. That's not going to fill the void. It's
Yes.
just not, I heard the greatest thing as well around the rooms, the program of the sex and love addiction, which is, by the way, is called SLAW, Sex Love Addicts Anonymous. Um,
SLAA.
SLAA, yeah. And for those of you interested and think you might have a sex or porn addiction, go to the SLAW website. You just Google SLAA, and there's a assessment you can take as well,
Oh,
40
cool.
questions, I believe. But what I've heard was brilliant. It's like, don't flirt unless you're interested to start a relationship with that person,
So good.
right? And yeah, some people might say like, yeah, but come on, it's everybody does it. It's natural, blah, 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 blah. Again, I beg to differ. You know, we know when we flirt, we turn it on. It's a switch. It's not like, well, I'm just happy and I smile and it happens. No, it's something, it's deeper than that. It's a pattern. It's a programming that turns it on or off without us even knowing it. Next thing you know, you're flirting, you get a number, you're looking for sex, and maybe she wants a relationship. You have sex, you promise her that it might be more, and suddenly you're bored and you're done and it's a mess, right? So that whole loop is the addiction sort of running the show because you're after something and you're going to do whatever it takes to get it, right?
Yeah. I want to jump in and say how this whole culture right now around sex and porn and I will tell you this whole Instagram thing, this is the truth. I opened my feed the other day and the reel of what I saw, excuse me, is not somebody that I follow. So either they were hacked or somebody else posted something else, but I literally looked at this and I was like, and I'm not a prudy person. So this is not about, oh, wow. I was like, what the bleep? Like this was, and I don't even click on the algorithms that would promote that. And there it was.
Mm.
And I was like, what the heck? Like it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And it's a quick hit to people. And of course, men are visual beings. Do you think they're not going to click? You know, I'm a curious being and I'll click. Like, well, what is this? What does this mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What
And go ahead.
okay. So what I wanted to say about all of this is that what I have noticed in the young men that I've coached around this, okay, because there's a lot of people that I've talked to around this, and there's a couple things that are happening because of this culture as well, which is really hurting the men and the women. We talked about how it's hurting the women. I want to talk about how it's hurting the men too, because I've heard many young men, and I'm thinking like, 18 and up, 18 to like 30 maybe. And it could go on longer, is that they're afraid now of sexual intimacy because of the porn culture, because of what they're seeing, because of how they think it's supposed to go. Okay. And how they're supposed to do these particular things that is supposed to get the woman going, which by the way, I've had people try to do that. I know, do something with me, and I'm not talking about sex or anything. I'm just talking about the way they were handling things. And I was like, in the middle of it, I'm like, they got this out of a porn because this is not what but it was something that they thought they needed to do because they
Yeah.
saw it in a porn. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I need to, redirect you here, because just because you think you saw that doesn't mean that works for me. But I'm noticing men are afraid of sex because I've heard them, they've literally said to me, I'm not like that. I don't want to do that. That's not like me, or I'm not built that way. I don't think I could last that long. The list goes on and on and on. So
Yeah.
there's this comparisonitis that is also happening because of all of this.
Yeah.
The males and the females, everybody's comparing,
Yeah.
and it all boils down to I'm not good enough. So
Absolutely.
there's one thing that I want to say, and then we're going to move on to the next topic regarding this, is that please, young people or anybody that's having this, what's required to have a healthy sex life with your person is conversation.
Yeah.
It's a scary talk sometimes because it's about our pieces and our parts and our stuff. And, that could be a difficult conversation for a lot of people. It's going to require courage to do. But I will tell you, once that door is open and you both can have an open conversation about this, the most amazing sex life is going to come from it,
Yeah.
because you are actually talking to the person that this doesn't seem right, but can help you with that, is the one that's going to be working with this with you. So any men out there that feel like, young men, older men, whatever, that feel like you're not enough because it doesn't look like a porn, it's not supposed to look like a porn. It's supposed to look like what your chosen female, the person that you love or you want to be intimate with, wants. And it hopefully will have honest communication with you, and it may be way less complicated than you think it is. So I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. And if I may just add that,
yes,
when we create this thoroughly connected relationship with someone, right, in a romantic partnership where we have to be authentic and vulnerable in order to get true intimacy. We can't, physical intimacy is physical intimacy, but truly, as they say, into me you see, right? We have
vulnerability,
to
yeah.
allow, we have to allow our partner to see us fully, which includes, unfortunately, our shadows, our dark stuff, or we think it's dark, right? Our past, like our past behavior, maybe how many people we've slept with, maybe we were sexually abused as a child, maybe, like you said, maybe we have only lasted 3 minutes the longest before. Whatever the thing that we're hiding, that we're trying to hide, so that we sort of are seen as our best self, right? That, when we share that with our partner, and then add what you were saying, when we then share what we'd like to explore, or what we're uncomfortable with, or what triggers us, or what we get anxiety around, and when there's a safety that's created, right, in this partnership, let's just say in this bedroom moment, then however it goes is however it goes, but there will be love and understanding. And then you can, like you said, you can have a conversation, you can sort of adjust it. It's not oh, now it's perfect, she's the one. It's an overtime kind of creation, as a
It is
joint
a creation.
creation, right? There's
Yeah.
lots of ingredients, right? You need the vulnerability, the authenticity, you need the exploration, the safety, uh,
Patient.
patience. You need, when we say love, what is love? Well, it's all of that. Like
Yes.
you, right? And I'm no expert in all of that. I've had my own failures in life, but I'm starting to see that it takes all of that when you've chosen your special person, and then the work starts. That's not when it ends. It's not like, oh, I'm good, I'm set, we're married, I got the woman or man of my dream, let's go, right? That's when the work starts.
And let me tell you something, when you start talking about what you prefer, what you want to try, or the things you're embarrassed to say, all of these type of things, what I've noticed as a female coming to, having a heterosexual relationship with a male, they're so damn happy. Thank you for not being a mystery that I have to figure out and now I feel like a failure, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay to redirect and to say this, that, the other thing. So we'll move forward from that, but I just want people to know that if you are thinking that you're supposed to be some kind of something, so I'm just going to hide out in my room and do my own thing, keeping you from that, I promise you, it's not as complicated as you think. Yes, there probably are some people out there that have problems and are going to attack you or whatever, but there are the people that really do want to have this loving and committed and growing relationship where you said it's a creation. And just you saying those words, Roman, I was like, yes, you just create together.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. So I want to move on to, I'm not sure we really talked about this, so I want to just real quickly talk about what's considered healthy masturbation. We had a conversation the other day because, like I said, we pre-gamed for this, you guys. Normally we don't, but we really wanted to make sure that we covered some important topics because we're not sure we'll have another episode on this. So I'm
Right.
like, this is a biggie. So we talked about that, and you gave such a great definition of what is healthy masturbation. I know we kind of started talking about it in the beginning, but let's reiterate that in a more
Yeah.
direct way.
So, yeah, great question. I remember us talking about it. It's very important, I think, because that's for most people, it's like, I don't really, what is it, right? So, again, there's a spectrum, right? There's the don't masturbate. It's a sin, right? I'm going to take it to the extreme, right? It's a
Yep.
sin. It's bad. Don't do it. Stay away from it because it can have, as we're talking about, addictive and destructive behavior. So just don't do it. Then there's the other end of the spectrum. It's like, who cares? We all do it. It's great. It's needed, whatever, right? So that's the spectrum. Um, Healthy is in the middle. Um, for the sake of having a visual example, right? It's never in exactly in the middle, but so what's the middle? Well, first of all, we leave the shame where it belongs in the past, right? It's not dirty. It's not bad. It's not wrong inherently, right? It is, if we look at self-pleasure resulting in an orgasm, it's beautiful. It's probably the most powerful physical sensation we can have. I always joke, number two in line is the sneeze, right? When you have a good sneeze.
Right. They say that the sneeze
Yeah.
is the closest thing to an orgasm. I learned that in college.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so an orgasm feels great. And masturbation, we've all had quickies where it's just over and done and you feel great, but there can be a process of getting to the orgasm that's beautiful, sensual, fun, right? So part of that is what I call healthy. Now, where we can go into unhealthy is when it becomes compulsive, when it becomes the numbing out, just like smoking a cigarette and it starts again in early childhood where a child was in an uncomfortable situation, often repeatedly, right? Where it's abusive parents or arguing parents. And look, I always say just because there's no drama doesn't mean there's no trauma. So I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, my childhood was pretty good. There was no arguing, there was none of that. But look, it doesn't take much for a certain child to feel unsafe. Let me just say, every child, when you're that young and your nervous system is so brand new and so fragile, right? The little antennas of your nervous system pick up every little thing
Yep.
and suddenly feel unsafe. And if it happens that around that time you somehow discover touching your body and that feels good, guess what? Would you rather be unsafe or feel good? You're going to go to good pleasure, bodily pleasure, sensation to think that that's going to be safer, right? I'm going to be safer over here feeling good than I am unsafe in this weird environment, right?
It's very encapsulated within yourself,
Right,
right?
right.
So it's
It's
kind of
really
small
warm and fuzzy,
components.
and that's why you're self-soothing,
Yeah.
right? You take a blanket and you self-soothe, right? So now the brain wires in a certain way that you go, whenever I'm stressed or unsafe, or whenever a negative emotion's coming at me, I feel uncomfortable, I'm just going to go masturbate. And kids do this sometimes as young as, I heard, I don't know, 2, 3 years old or whatever, where they start touching themselves, and suddenly, and it's already pre-wired that way. There's some kids at 8 years old, they were already masturbating all the time and so forth. And I don't
Let's
know the
pause there
statistics.
real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
If you think about this, people, like some little kids learn to play with their ear
Hmm.
or they rub their blankie, right? And
Right. It's soothing.
they might find
Yeah.
their parts.
Yeah. Just
That's
because your
something
private
wrong
parts,
with your kid.
right. And a child cannot distinguish between the ear and a penis. It's
Yes.
a body part, right?
Yep.
They haven't yet been told that, oh, that is very private and that's very different than your ear. Your ear is not creating life. You can hear life. That's creating it, right? They don't know that.
Yeah, don't
So,
show anybody that. People can see your ear, but yeah, so
right.
there's this whole thing
Well,
that
that's when the shame comes in, right? But at the beginning, when they like, it's a great point that you make. When they start to numb out, they don't know that it's different, right? It's just, it feels good, right? So they keep doing that. Now the brain wires that way. Now the brain eventually, and then comes the dopamine release and all that. So then masturbation becomes compulsive, right? Now you're a teenager, you discover porn, you start masturbating, you start having wet dreams, orgasms, right? You kind of get the whole thing. Oh, when I do that, I feel great and it's good. And then the world tells you, oh, it's about having sex with women and getting them pregnant. And, then the whole sexual universe opens up. The problem is, if the brain is still wired that way, now what we do is we don't only just numb out for the physical pleasure. Now we want external stimulation. We want to see naked women, or men, right? We want to see porn. We want to be stimulated. And so we masturbate to it, right? And now there's an additional wiring that says, I need something external to arouse me so I can get that hit. And so that's why sometimes people get so stressed out, and they will instantly go to because they don't have much time, they go to porn, masturbate, have an orgasm, go back to work, right?
Mhm.
I had moments like that in my life where I was so much pressure and stress from work that I was like, I need to take a 5-minute bathroom break and get this done and come back, right? Just to be open. And so that happens. Now the wiring is almost complete, right? Because you're like uncomfortable, going back to childhood. I need to numb out, get the good feeling so that I feel okay, and go back and deal with the same shit, right? Nothing's been solved really. You're still
No,
dealing with the
nothing's been
same shit.
solved.
But now that's suddenly burned into your system and your wiring. And now it's an addiction, right? It's a compulsive act. Now, you go one level down from that. So I'm walking us backwards towards healthy, right? So that's the extreme
Oh, good
wiring.
idea.
Now we go one level back where we say, okay, don't watch porn, don't use any imagery. But now what we do is we have euphoric recall, meaning when we're asleep or before we go to bed, like I'm laying in bed, I'm closing my eyes, I'm like, I'm not watching porn, but I start masturbating. And now I think of images I've seen. I think of the woman I just saw at the grocery store. I still use an external kind of imagery to arouse me, right? Now you could say that's still, is that healthy or unhealthy? Well, given that somebody who has compulsive behavior around
It's
masturbation,
one step
it's one
towards
step removed,
healthy.
but it's still
Yeah,
unhealthy.
right.
How it eventually becomes healthy, and it takes a while to retrain the brain, is that when we're naturally aroused, and yes, for men, I hear it's uh, whatever, 3 times more than women a month, or, don't quote me on statistics, but I think it's like 2 or 3 times a month where I notice it, like, oh, I feel sexual energy. I feel turned on. I feel great. And right. So then when it's natural and we then engage in masturbation and we keep the focus on ourselves, meaning the pleasure, what your body feels like. And you can even say, I love my private part. It feels so good, right? It seems weird. I know to some people talking, they're like, what the hell is he talking about? But
No, this is
really,
what they need
then
to
it's
hear.
called self-pleasure. So I could have given you the short answer first. I wanted to get there. Self-pleasure is healthy masturbation. Masturbation using external, like sort of euphoric recall or porn, external stimulation to get there, I believe is unhealthy because of what could happen to the brain after that is that you can stay addicted to it. And now, this is a whole nother topic. Now we're giving away, speak for men, by releasing our semen, we're giving away life force energy. Life force energy isn't just a semen orgasm sex. Life force energy is the energy of creation, like manifesting things in life.
Mhm.
Now we are more tired, lethargic, we're not inspired, we feel empty, we feel shameful. All of that will keep a young man at home and his life isn't going anywhere because he's depleted. That energy that gives a man the drive to create and manifest is now spilled daily, like 5 times a day, right? So no wonder we have people depressed, anxious, their lives are falling apart. They're still living with their parents. They've
Unmotivated.
unmotivated, right? I know I'm sort of, this is a longer answer to it, but
No,
that's
this
why I
is great.
believe, self-pleasure as a healthy masturbation is so important, not just for men, for women as well. But in this case, we started off talking about young men, right? We do need to bring that back. I feel we do need to educate our children about, and I'm there with my kids now. I'm preparing to have that conversation as well. It's like, what is a healthy way to masturbate, and what can eventually kind of bring you to this compulsive addictive behavior around it. And if you can, stay away from that. You may go into it for a little bit. We all kind of play with it, right? But really, that's how I would sum that up.
This is why I wanted to have this conversation because things present in life and cultures, and it kind of like starts to build and build, and then it gets this big, 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 big wave, and then it starts to have problems, and then until we go, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And back in the, growing up in the 70s, having a Playboy magazine under the counter in the bathroom, finding my dad's or the I remember my neighbor kids being like, come over, we found my dad's Playboys, and we'd go over there, we'd look through the Playboys, right? But that's all it was. They weren't home all day in their home bathroom doing their thing. It was just, they had some Playboys under the counter. I'm not here to say that whether it was healthy or not. I don't know their life, but I know my dad wasn't spending all day every day in the bathroom, right? But it was there, but it wasn't too much. Plus, Playboys in the beginning were not bad. Like, you didn't see certain things, but then new magazines would come out that was even worse, like Hustler, and then we're da 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 da. Okay. Then it turned into the internet and then movies, and it just got bigger, 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 easier access. Uh, that's really what it boils down to. So much easier. Well, it turned into the video, the VHS tapes. Okay. We
Yeah.
found one of
Yeah.
those in my dad's store, which was, we spent a summer watching that, to be honest. Like,
Yep.
what is this? The neighbor kids came over and we all watched a porn. And it wasn't too hardcore and nasty, but you know, it was there. So we watched it. Anyway, the point is that it was like less accessible, but as it's gone on, it's become more and more and more and more and more, which I believe has increased the problem because it's so much easier to get the drug than it used to be to get the drug before, right?
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here like, oh my gosh. So the one thing I did not teach my kids or have the conversation about is what is healthy masturbation. It wasn't even in my wheelhouse. It wasn't even in my thoughts because I didn't grow up with that issue, or that was an issue in the culture. So I love that you want to talk to your children about that now, because this is part of the conversation. We
Yeah.
need to say it's okay, and here's when it can go awry. And you can
Yeah.
have these conversations later too. But I think it's so incredibly important to delineate that for our young people, because it is normal, it is healthy, there's nothing wrong with it. And what are you using it for? And
Yeah.
are you even using it? That then it turns into
And look, at the end of the day, I always say, if you're somebody who compulsively masturbates and watches porn or has sex all the time, and casual sex, and you're running around life and you're actually fulfilled, you look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and you're like, I'm doing amazing, right? I have yet to meet that person, because most people that I've met clients, relationships I've had, and so forth that had a similar addiction that I've had around porn, masturbation, sex, are either on antidepressants or anxiety medication. They're dealing with other disorders that they sort of just say, well, I just have this thing. I have ADHD. I have this thing. And I don't want to get too much into detail on that, but I'm a big believer that all of these things like depression, anxiety, it's all it all comes down to like not being truthful with yourself, not expressing yourself, not actually expressing, but suppressing. So then it's depressing, right?
Mm.
And to me, that's, but if it floats your boat and you're happy, then I say go do whatever you need to do. Like I'm not a judge of anyone's life. You don't need to live a certain way to please me. I've just over time noticed that it is a pattern. It is a pattern that leads people into depression, anxiety, the shame spiral, disconnected from society, not able to have intimate relationships, and so forth. I've been there. I'm still going through recovery and healing and stuff. It takes time to rewire the brain, but I'm starting to see that most of the people in our society that say they're fine the way they're living and they're just like totally in hedonism and running around and running away from intimacy, that they're fine. Yeah, because they're medicated and they also drink and they party and they sort of numb it, and they're gonna
They
wake up
think
one
they're
day.
fine.
Yeah, they're gonna realize one day, oh shit, now I'm 60
Yes.
and I have been running from this pain, trying to fill this void with an external substance or sex or whatever. And now I have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's going to hit hard. So that's why I love doing what I do
Yeah.
to try to help people to wake up now. It took me 53 years to really wake up, you can do this earlier, I hope.
Yes. So I want to ask one final question that might lead into two, and that is what I have seen along my journey and dealing with, these type of things and hearing stories. And I've always been so incredibly humbled and honored to hear these stories because that tells me that these people they trust me to share this with them because this could be a source of embarrassment and shame, like we've talked about a lot on here. And what I'm about to ask could be a huge source of embarrassment and shame for a person. And that is what I have noticed is that a typical heterosexual male who completely identifies as hetero has never had any thoughts of anything, that they have sometimes gone towards same-sex sexual encounters within their addiction. But then when talking to them okay, well, is there something within you that really wants to be with a man or this, that, and they're like, they really ponder and they're like, I've thought about this and not a lot and no. So I would like to talk about why that is that this can happen too. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your partner is gay, but what's coming from that,
Yeah.
why it's been birthed, why it's come forth for them.
I love this question because again, I love what you and I do, right? This is real talk. This
It
is
is real talk.
this is not what is it called? Beating around the bush, right?
No fluff.
No fluff. So I'll share a couple experiences. So my own father, we believe was either gay or bisexual. And this is after he passed. He left some hints. I don't want to get into details, and I've
Interesting.
heard some stories, right? Um, so that could have been a gay man in the closet, sort of arranged marriage in a small town in Switzerland because it was a small town and you need to keep up the face, right?
Yeah.
Got married, had two kids. You know, that's one version, right? Then there's the curiosity version, right? There's the like, I'm not sure, maybe I am bisexual, maybe I'm gay. So a situation arises. Usually, I won't say always, but most of the time, there's some kind of a uninhibitor involved, right? Like alcohol, drugs, something where you're just looser. Um, and so then an experience is had. And now the question becomes, well, am I gay? Should I get a divorce? Have I been in the closet, right? So those two scenarios I just mentioned, let's just park them on the side because they don't necessarily have to be related to sex addiction. They can be, but not necessarily. But what I've seen and heard is that there's a third category of men that will, and by the way, this happens for women too, um, expand their possibilities for pleasure. What does that mean? So, well, they're married to a female. Maybe the sex life isn't going great, right? Because A, he's an addict and he's hiding it, or he can't be satisfied, right? There's this insatiable kind of drive sometimes. We call them nymphomaniacs, right? We have
Oh
labels,
yeah, forgot about that term. That's a term.
right? But it's
Mhm.
really a nice sort of what I call a French movie title for a sex addict, right? But the situation here is that it's that expansion of, well, if I can also get pleasure that way and this way, now my net is much wider. Now if I need pleasure, I can get it, you know, any day.
So
And it
looking
is,
at it like a drug, kind of like now I've got several choices for my drug.
yeah. Yeah, it's almost
Mhm.
like now I have this other drug that
Yeah.
isn't quite super exactly what I want, but it also feels really good. And
Hmm.
if I don't tell anyone that I'm doing this drug as well, who cares, right? And so I've seen it happen where married men, right, that are supposedly straight, heterosexual, will go and have sex with men. And again, usually there's alcohol involved, drugs, right? So we don't feel inhibited, that suddenly it's like, it's just the pleasure takes over. And usually those men, and I've talked to husbands and clients I've worked with, I've heard it in rooms, they're not, like you said, they're not interested in a truly intimate connection or a romantic connection. They're not actually going to be in love with that person, right? Some are, some there's people who are pansexual, bisexual, whatever, fill in the blank, that are truly that way because they love the human being. But when we're talking about an addiction, it's really the sex. It's the physical pleasure. And that's why I think we see this more often, that in the case of sex addicts, that it's just like, where can I get the fix from? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It could be transgender, male, female, whatever. Some go even way darker than that. I don't want to get into details, but they're so desperate and so addicted.
Yeah.
I need my fix.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in right here and say that our parts are designed to get aroused. There is, I think in the clitoris, there's something like 1 million nerve endings. I heard this once that has, it has the same amount of nerve endings in our entire body, something like that. It's
Wow.
like there's a lot, and I'm sure that's the same for the Darth Vader hat on a penis. That's what I call it. Okay. Like
Yep.
it's got a lot of nerve endings. So our parts are designed to be aroused. That's part of the procreation process, like let's like this so that, and it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have to have a person that is having a sex addiction doesn't necessarily have to have their gender of choice arousing those parts. Okay. So I
Right.
just think it's
Right.
really, really important that we bring this up because, like you said, this can go on and on and on, and it can get really deep and really dark and go in many different places. But what I wanted to say is that I've also known people that have gone to, in conversations that I've had where people have gone from hetero to gay sexual relations because it was free. And I know this is going to sound strange, but they would have to have paid for a prostitute,
Yeah.
but there was a
Yeah.
lot of gay men out there that were willing to do the oral sex or the whatever, and it
Yeah.
was free. So they're
Yeah.
like, well, I could pay for it and do that, or I could do this and it could be free.
Yeah.
So you know, the one thing that Roman and I committed ourselves to with this podcast is exactly what the subtitle said, real life, real talk, real healing, because that's what we're all about here. And we designed this podcast to talk about these underbelly topics and some that are not so underbelly. But we're not going to hold back in this episode because this is the stuff that people need to know. I healed my stuff through life by arming myself with knowledge. And I don't mean arming myself in an armored way. I mean just soaking in, like, give me more information so I know what I'm dealing with so I can handle it. So in the last few minutes, Roman, I just really want to talk about if somebody, first I want to go from their perspective that if somebody just is single and they're like, I think I have a sex addiction or a porn addiction and I want a partner, because at the end of the day, what do we want? We do want that connection. That's how we're made. We're like a bunch of kittens, that's how humans are. We want to be with other kittens and cuddle and, be in this big loving ball. So what would you say to a single person? But also after that, I want to go into the fact that what's required if somebody's partner, because this doesn't have to end a marriage. This doesn't have to end a relationship. The couple can heal from this. I've seen it. So I'm here to tell you it's your choice whether you want to or not. It's your choice where you're at, how the whole rest of the relationship is. There's a lot of variables here, but it
Yeah.
doesn't mean, oh, my partner has a porn and sex addiction. I have not addiction, that I have to now not be with that person. So let's talk about first if what someone can do, Roman, if they're single or they're just being casual out there in the world, but they're like, I noticed this and I know it's going to hurt an upcoming relationship that I really desperately want. What can they do? And then let's talk about the other half and then
Okay.
wrap it up.
Yeah. So the first question is really what you're saying is about an individual that's single that thinks they might have a sex addiction. How can they recover from
Where do
that?
they start? Yeah.
And
What do they do?
yeah, well, I think the first order of business is admitting that you have a problem, right? That's like that with anything in life,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, it's admitting that it's out of control and self-destructive. And self-destructive, I have a new relationship to that word. I used to think, oh, that's if you're a drug addict and your body breaks down and you're destructing yourself, right? But I'm looking at it now more from a self, as in like your spiritual self, like you're destructing that true self. So you become a persona or a shell of a person, right? And whether that body is still healthy or not, if you destruct yourself, your spiritual being, there's a corruption going on. It's time to get honest, right? It's time to say, look, I've only been attracting the same crappy guys or girls, and
Yeah.
I've been in 15 relationships now, and they all ended weirdly, and they've all been drug addicts and what or alcoholics or abusive or unavailable, right? Like look for your pattern. And
Yes.
it's
Pattern.
hard, right? It's hard to see it yourself. So with a coach, therapy, a 12-step program, you want to get to dig for the pattern. You want to be your own, investigator, detective, and find your patterns. Because once you see the pattern, then you can take responsibility and go, okay, there's a pattern here. I have a problem. Now what? Second step is that you got to get some help. You can't do it by yourself, right? Because I've heard people say, oh, well, I've I just finished a relationship with yet another man who is narcissistic, and I hate labels and we throw them around so easily, but it's like I'm going to stay away from that type of guy. Well, you can't, because if your pattern is to attract those kind of people, he'll
Amen.
right, he'll show up in a different form, a different facade, and it's going to happen again, because unless we see the pattern and we recover from that, we heal the pattern, we change it, right, we up our frequency. I always say we cannot attract anyone more healed than we are, right? So again, if the pattern is that we're attracting these shitty people, we got to see where the shitty is over here, right?
Yes. We got to take
And
responsibility. It boils
yeah,
down to that self-awareness, self-responsibility.
absolutely. And I've yet to meet somebody who's done it on their own, without a therapist, without being in workshops, without going to a program, So that would be the second step. And then the third step, and this is not well, in program it's required or suggested. I think it's 1,000% required. The third step is stop all sexual activity, stop dating, get off the apps. If you can get off social media, get off social media.
Do it.
I call it, this is my version of what ADHD really stands for in my book, is an attention detox, um, healing discipline, right?
Yeah.
You bring your attention to just yourself and you work on yourself. Work sounds like, what do I do? Well, you do the therapy, you do the program, but mainly you stay away from all these external distractions, because then you have to face really the discomfort that you've been running from all these years, which is 3 years old, 4 years old, uncomfortable. Remember, masturbate, check out, ADHD, get addicted, numbing out, all that stuff. These are all coping mechanisms
Yeah.
responding to a discomfort, right? And feeling of unsafety. Well, at some point in life, here's the bad news. At some point in life, we all have to stop and face, and we can stop running from that pain, and we have to face it. We have to feel it to heal it. That's really all this comes
Amen.
down to, you know? And then when we do that work for, could be a year, take a year off of dating. I'm now on month 10 and a half, right? Where I've just been with me. And it's excruciating at times. It's getting better, but I'm telling you that it's the best thing I've ever done. I'm going to continue one more year, 2024, maybe longer, of really the least amount of distractions in my life. I'm not on social media. I'm doing minimal contact with females, not in a romantic way, not in a dating. And I'm really just focusing on my own healing and therapy and the program. And to me, that's access to really rewiring your brain so you can then go be in a healthy relationship where, even though you have past behaviors that could be considered addictive, you're now engaging like truthfully with another human being. To answer that first question, right?
And,
Like
and
then you're ready.
for those that are going to be watching this on my channel, know my story, or if they've read my book, they know that I did the same thing. I didn't have a porn and sex addiction, but I had to get really radically honest with myself about my pattern of attracting lopsided and painful relationships. And I vowed to remain single and celibate for as long as possible. Like, I didn't even know. And I didn't so much, same thing, minimal contact with men, nothing that was remotely could be a romantic thing, didn't even have a coffee with people. Absolutely not. And here's what I want people to understand in this piece of it is, this is what you're really doing is you're returning back to yourself, because we are these fragmented people. We're just fragmented out. We're trying to find the love, approval, a sex validation, blah, 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 all the things from the outside world. And we have completely abandoned self, which is causing these problems. So in this time, what I did, and I feel like this is what you're doing too, Roman, we're pulling back, we're pulling back, we're pulling back, we're pulling back to self. And we're learning to give ourselves all those things that we've been hustling for out in the outside world. Now we learn to give those to ourselves. And from
Yeah.
that place, that was the place that I felt, get this, I didn't even care if I had a relationship.
Yeah.
Here I was, a relationship junkie my whole life. One from one to I think I was without a relationship between 20 and 21. And there was about a year maybe after my first divorce, like a year in there somewhere. I don't remember my age, 30, 31. I don't know. And that was it. It was just one right after the other. So by me taking that time and saying, what am I doing? I got to return back to me, and I became so whole that I turned into this most amazing, brilliant, authentic version of myself, which by the way, 10 years ago, now 10 years later, that was just the beginning. I thought I got into this amazing space where I am now, even more 10 years later, and married and in a relationship, is an even more in-depth version of myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
taking this time, it's the best
Invaluable.
that anybody can. There's nothing like it.
And I will just say, if for those of you listening, watching, if you haven't read Kristen's book, I highly recommend it, The Recovering People Pleaser. Get it on Amazon.
Thank you, Rob.
Um, Not because you're my friend and co-host, but I was blown away. And I think I was able to see that, oh, I've been a people pleaser all my life. And here's the kicker, how it's related to addiction, is that people pleasing is a form of manipulation, right? Because you're manipulating the environment to please everyone so that you don't have to deal with anything uncomfortable,
It's
right?
covert manipulation.
It is. And when we see that and go, oh, that was actually manipulation, that's not me being a nice person, right? It looks like that on the surface, but it doesn't do us any good. It actually takes us into these addictive patterns, into the darkness, the hiding, the shame, all that stuff that you talk about, which I loved reading it. It was such an easy read, and It was like somebody punching you with a velvet glove gently, like you know. That's how I describe it.
I
But
have, I do have to say though that Roman did say that because when the book was launched, of course my friends are gonna buy it. They're like, yeah, and he's not kidding. He literally reached out to me. He's like, yeah,
oh
I
yeah,
thought I'll buy your book.
I was like, sure, I'll
Yeah,
support you.
of course I'll support Kristen, whatever. And then like I think you read it the same day, and like
Oh yeah,
hours
I
later, I get this email, this text, and you're like, oh my God.
yeah.
I was like, really? And you're like, oh, so this is legit, you guys. We're not bullshitters here. We're
Oh no,
as real as
it's
they
a real,
go.
and it's really well written. And I
Thank
will just say that, I'm not for labels. I'm not like, oh, I diagnosed
you
myself as a
either.
people pleaser. No, but I was a people pleaser, and that's not who I am, right? Just like I have addictions around sex and love. I'm not a sex and love addict for life. That's not who, I don't identify as that. But I use
Great.
that just like when people say, I have ADHD. It's like, no, you don't have ADHD. You behave in a manner that is
Uh,
labeled as ADHD right now,
let's
but that
talk
can be
about this.
rewired. Yeah.
We need to do an episode on labels because I am the same exact way. And sometimes to get our point across in a world that uses labels, we have to use these labels.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a
It's a shorthand.
whole thing behind that, and I'm exactly in that with you. So
We'll definitely do that. Yep. I just want to get to the second part of your
yeah,
question so we don't
yeah,
forget, because it's fresh in my mind, is that if you're already with someone in a marriage or partnership, committed or, short term, long term, and you realize you as the partner might have a sex addiction or love addiction. Well, we're talking about sex or porn here. We'll do another episode on love and relationship addiction because that's another thing. Um, so, so the short answer is this, and you've already said that it's a choice, right? We can stay with a partner out of choice and say, let's make this work, or we can say, and in my case, I'm dealing with that right now, is I'm looking at my pattern of my last marriage, uh, and I see that perhaps, and I'm keeping it on my side of the street, that I got into the relationship, and I don't want to say for the wrong reasons, because we have two beautiful children. My still wife is a beautiful human, amazing person. I such a teacher, will always be. And at the same time, I see how I chose the women that I chose in the past. It was either attracting the really dramatic, coming from a broken household, maybe even alcoholics themselves, drug users, promiscuous women that I try to save, as a savior complex, or after I've had enough of this craziness, I went to someone safe, someone who I did not have to worry about. They would never cheat, they would never drink, they would never go crazy. It was to rest there and go like, okay, I'm safe, right? But then I would get bored again and I'd go back to the craziness. So I kind of did again this extreme
oh, yes,
pendulum,
that's
right?
so good.
And now I'm learning where's the middle, where's me, who am I in all of this, and what do I actually want? What kind of partner? But that's sort of a side note, right? But I'm saying that because the choice to stay with someone. So let's just go with this, right? If somebody wants to stay with their partner, right, and work this out, then again, it's the same work, right? That both of them have to first admit there's an issue here, right? And I invite the other partner who doesn't identify perhaps as a porn or sex addict to also dig deeper and see how come I wasn't aware of this? How come, was I checked out? Was I maybe at work too much? Was I ignoring it? Um, and how come it's hard for me to talk about it, and how come I want to just punch him in the face and hope he dies, right? Like both parties have to come to the table open-minded, aware, responsible. It's 100%, 100%. It's not 50-50 or 100 you, 0 me. It's 100 over here and it's 100 over here. Now that's going to take some time, but that's again through therapy. I highly recommend, if there's been sex addiction, there's some therapists that deal with CSAT, that deal with sex addiction, CSAT therapists. Um, and
C
or
CSAT?
CSAT, yeah, it's
Tell me what that is.
sex.
How do you
You
spell it?
have to
C
look it up. It's C like Charlie and then SAT, I believe.
Oh, CSAT.
I think
Never
it's
heard of that.
certified sex addiction therapist. I think
Okay.
that's the
Certified sex addiction therapist.
therapist.
Okay.
I think.
Makes sense.
And so somebody like that can help, or again, 12-step programs, right? But again, it's not like, oh, you, husband or wife or partner, you have the issue, so you go do the addiction program.
Yeah, no, this is a teamwork.
Yes. And there's also programs for the spouses of, as there are for alcoholics and drug users and so forth. There's programs also for the other partner to feel into it and see, to be in that world, right? Because if you're not in it together, then it's always your partner that has the problem and you clean up your shit and then we're good, right? And that's just not true for a relationship, because a relationship is made up of two people and you're relating to each other. And if one is doing the work and the other one is judging and waiting until you're done, you're not really relating to each other, right?
Nope.
And so that would be my suggestion. And then, yeah, it takes a lot of patience. Betrayal trauma is real. I had my infidelities in my marriage, and for my wife to recover from that and to deal with that, it's no joke. I mean, it's really, like you said, to feel into that betrayal trauma, like the wreckage I've caused, right? To take responsibility for that and have humility around it. And, but at the same time, letting go of the guilt and shame as
Yes,
well, right?
there's a lot of
The
work involved.
process. Because I always say, I wanted to say this at the beginning, I forgot to say it, that uh, addicts aren't addicts because they're addicts. Hurt people hurt people. I was hurt as a child. And when I say hurt, sexual abuse, lack of nurture, cheated on, all of it adds up, right? Eventually you put up a wall and we're like, I'm going to hurt you first. I'm going to leave you first. I'm going to cheat on you first. Like, that's a hurt child. That's not an addict, because in our society, we sort of, we outcast the addict as like, this is a bad apple. God made a mistake. This is a dirty one, right?
Addicts are created, not born. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so that's important for the other partner to hold that space. And that's going to take everything. That's going to be so triggering and challenging for us not to judge our addictive partner
Yep.
and not to outcast them, but to have some grace and forgiveness. Because look, I was in that position. I was hurting. I was slowly killing myself.
Yeah.
And then for someone to say like, oh, great, well, fuck you, addict, die. Well, that's not going to do any good. Now, I know they have every reason to react that way, but still, it ain't repairing anything yet.
No, and I just want to add this in because people are going to be at all different stages when they hear this, right? People could be like, they could be dealing with this for a while and they could be pretty far along with recovery with their spouse or however that's working for them, or they're just now going, oh my God, maybe my person has a problem here. So, with all that respect, I always want to say this, that we are on a spiritual journey here. We are teeny tiny human beings, okay? We don't know what the fuck we're doing. And we have this thing called a brain, and it protects us and it shows us and it puts up defense mechanisms and it represses emotion and it does things in order for us to survive. And how that turns out in behaviors is often what saved us in our youth. It's what kept us going when things were really freaking rough. But it doesn't serve us in our adulthood. And I
Right.
believe the spiritual journey here is the undoing. It is the relearning. It is all the things which we call healing, which I call self-healing,
Yeah.
of those things that happened in our youth that turned into bad behaviors. So what saved us in youth is a problem in adulthood. Taking responsibility, going, okay, this is how my wounds presented. This is how my wounds, coupled with my DNA and my experiences and my brain, this is how it presented for me. None of us are immune. So, yes, your person might be a sex addict. And yes, there's betrayal and all the things. And I will believe me, I've been on the receiving end of this. So I'm
Yeah.
talking from pure experience here that yes, all the betrayals and the pains and all that's yes. But if you truly want to move forward, at some point, there's got to be a shift in perception from fear to love. There's got to be a shift in perception from that sucked, it hurts, but I love you. I understand that you are a wounded human being, and this is how it presented for you. And I'm going to stand next. I'm tearing up thinking this because this is real.
This is huge.
This
This
is
is what,
it
yeah.
hurts. It hurts on both sides. The addict is hurting. Everybody's hurting here. But if
Yeah.
you can, I used to tell people, hold hands when you argue. Try to hold hands with someone and call them an F and A hole or something. It's not easy,
That's
right?
great. Yeah.
But you hold hands when you argue. So this is going to have to be that thing is like, I don't care if you're touching fingertips, you know, you got to join together and make the decision that you're going to work through this together. And I promise you, if both parties, both, because it can't be done with one,
Nope.
doesn't work that way. Both parties go, I want this too. Let's join a pinky. Let's start each step of the journey together. You can get through this. And I've also heard couples say it was the best thing that ever happened to them because the therapy and the things that were required actually cleaned up their own inner worlds
Yes.
that helped them
Yep.
both show up as more complete individual units.
Yes. Yes.
Change the entire relationship. So
And you bring up a great point that we didn't really talk about. It's a bigger issue, and I think we could do a whole episode around what it takes to be 100% responsible for your life,
let's do it. It's my favorite. It's my favorite topic.
everything in
One
it,
of them.
right? Because it all boils down to that. Like I feel that the reason why there's so many nasty divorces in the world is because when a divorce happens, usually one person will say, well, it ain't my fault. You did it. So F you, and they give each other hell, and then it's nasty, right? Unfortunate for the children, usually if they have children.
Really unfortunate.
And that's what I call the 0%, 100%, right? Your fault. But when we can actually shift that and go, okay, I was in this relationship, I was in this marriage, I'm the second part of that, the other half. What can I be responsible for here? I may not see it right now, but let me do the work. And like you said, I think it's an opportunity to suddenly realize, oh my God, I was totally checked out. Oh my God, I was totally a carbon copy of my mother, how she treats my dad. Oh my, the list goes on. You fill in the
On
blank,
and
but
on.
there's an opportunity here. Oh, you just said this, right? Whenever something happens in the world that we call negative, there's an opportunity for growth when we say, huh, interesting, this thing just happened in my life. Well, let's say I'm 100% responsible, meaning it's here. I must have manifested it. What could be the possible reason why this is in my life? Could this be an access to something? Let's start digging, right? That's huge.
Yeah.
That's the real work, you
Yes.
know? No more pointing the finger, one finger points forward and three point backwards at me, right? That whole metaphor.
Oh, we got to go into we have to have the conversation about radical
Oh,
responsibility.
we will.
I'm all about it. So I want to close this down with this,
Yeah.
that in the show notes that we will put, and I'll leave it up to you to send me those things, but SLAA, SLA, and CSAT,
Yep.
those type of things, so that if anybody wants to look more into this, that they have, a place to go.
Yeah.
Also, we have the links to each other's platforms too, as well. If you're listening on Roman's platform, mine's there, and my platforms, Roman's is there. But what I also want to invite people to do is if any questions come up for you, to please reach out to one or the other of us. And I will tell you where you can reach out to me. And I would like to start fielding questions, and I'm going to tell you why. Because several people have said, listening to our first episode, they said, you guys could do like a Dear Abby, where people cut right in with their relationship questions and their struggles, and you could approach those questions. So
Yeah.
going forward, and this is real time, Roman has not heard this from me yet, but going forward, if we decide to collaborate with this, we could have just a little spot in the beginning or the end of the show where we answer people's questions, respond to people's questions, and or we just do an episode where we answer a ton of questions. So if
Absolutely.
anybody has a question in the last episode, this episode, or any episode going forward, please reach out. You can go to my website, kristenbrown.org, and click on one of the contact forms, or you can email me directly at hello@kristenbrown.org. Kristen with an EN, like here, and start just saying question for the Kristen Roman Show. Make sure you title it that, so I can keep that separate from the other things, and I know exactly what
Yep.
this is about.
Perfect. Yeah. And same for me. It's just my name, romanwyden.com. Or you can go to ADHD's Over, which is my other coaching around ADHD, or hello@adhdsover.com. send me questions, anything, and Kristen and I will huddle over those and make sure they get addressed, celebrated, answered to
We
the
do
best of
need
our
to
knowledge.
celebrate questions. I love that you use that word because
Yeah.
these questions are how we get answers, people. So
I
being
mean,
brave enough to ask the question, you're
yeah.
going to find the answer and it's going to change your trajectory. It can't
And
not.
some of the questions you asked, they're to be celebrated, right? Like they're these things that are hidden in the shadows of society where we don't talk about, we can't mention it. Whenever something's taboo, I go, well, let's talk about it because
Oh,
that's
100%.
needs to be talked about. That's in the shadow, right? If we can bring anything that's taboo from the shadow into the light, we've advanced as a society, you
Yes.
know.
Yes. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's listened here. Please subscribe. Don't forget to share with someone you love, someone you think that this episode could help. Also comment below on whosever channel you are listening to this from. Leave us a comment. That's another place you can ask your question is in the comment sections of these things. Feel free to like and do all the things that can get traction to this podcast because it is not going anywhere. So
And I
let's
think
get
there's
bigger.
there's a new algorithm, right? If I say like and subscribe, those things will pop up. They probably just did. I hope.
They light up. They
Yeah.
light up underneath, or they do. I think they light up, and if the person clicks on it, then like little special graphics come out of it, which is really cool.
Well, there's the celebration. I love it.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.